Anime! Alright, now that I've got your attention, let's learn some Meteor. Welcome back, gamers, and today we're going to be learning some Meteor tech and just some general stage movement. Alright, so I usually start off Meteor by doing something like this. So to break this down a little bit, what I start with is an aerial punch assault, which I went into a little bit of detail in the last video, but all you're really doing is A, B, B. So you do one A press to jump, one A press to glide, one B press to drill, and then one B press to punch and get to full speed. And it looks a little bit like this. Now after doing the aerial punch assault, you're going to immediately want to run straight towards this hint on the left, and then when you grab it, there's one of two things that you'll do from here. You'll either go to the ground to grab a piece that's lower on the ground beneath you, or you'll keep gliding forwards towards this spring that's right on the ledge over here. Now for the first outcome, there are one of two ways you want to go for ground pieces. You can either immediately, after reading the hint, if you determine it's a ground piece and it's on the left side of ground, you can break out of your jump and then just punch on the ground and run towards it. Or if you have to go right from reading the hint, say I had a piece like drilling tower, what I'd usually tend to do from here is I would immediately turn towards this big beam in the floor and I would do a slope boost off of the slope on the other side of the beam and then run towards my piece. So from here, if I had drilling tower, I would be pretty much next to it by now. This slope boost is really easy to practice and is a great way of gaining a bunch of speed on this ground. On the screen now, I put a graphic that shows you which direction you should go depending on the ground piece that you have. However, there are some ground pieces that you should reset upon reading the hint, such as between the noisy machines, and everyone's favorite between the rotating beacons. Center of a triangle star is only fine if you know the sets that go with it, so other than that I would recommend resetting it. However, some of its confirmed and 50-50 sets are really good to know, so I'll put some on the screen right now for you to learn. All of the ground piece ones are completely acceptable to take, provided that you take the right path to them. In terms of non-ground pieces you should reset, Evil Water Drops is a debated one. Honestly, I would reset Evil Water Drops, but some people take it because they prefer having the life and not having to reset over getting some slightly worse off sets for it, so it's up to you. You definitely want to reset any pieces that require you to take 2 rockets, like a guns machine protecting the arc. Dangerous Water Drops. Dangerous Liquid is an awkward one because it can be at both of these places. And there's no way of telling which one you're going to get, so it's really up to you to decide if you want to take that risk or not. Because on one hand, the piece that's in the middle platform is actually a really good piece one, and on the other hand, the one that's at the top is actually not the worst, but it's definitely not something that you would want to take. If you get a piece caught in front of the weight elevator, then you should cry about it. Why? Game? Why? But yeah, you should just reset it. And by far the worst piece in front of a shortcut rocket. I'm sorry, it was a joke. Please don't get mad. This is like the best piece one in the stage. Please do not reset this. Alright, now I'm done with telling you when not to play the game. Let's get on to actually playing the game. So if your piece one isn't on the ground like I mentioned earlier, what you do is you grab this hint and then you immediately do a full jump. And this is the most important part that I have to stress. You have to make sure that Knuckles gets a max height jump out of this. And then glide towards the spring. You're aiming to land on this white bar on the wall here, or a little bit higher if you can. Now, the reason I mention this is a really common beginner mistake is to glide super quickly thinking that they need their inputs to be really tight and then have to climb like halfway up the wall to get to this spring. Now, once you're doing this jump at a full height, you want to land somewhat near the white bar and then immediately jump and glide into the spring. You should barely be able to clip the spring's hitbox and it will take you right up to the first rocket. Provided that you have a piece that can spawn it within reason, this becomes your first piece check of the entire stage. So what you want to do along the way to this rocket is you want to make sure that you're glancing at the back left pillar. I'll move Knuckles to where I'm talking about now so you can visualize it better. And if you're lucky, sometimes there's just kind of a piece chilling here moving up and down across this pillar that you can easily scope along the way to the rocket. You gotta make sure that you lock your camera when you hit the spring though, otherwise the camera just kind of goes up and then doesn't give you a chance to check the piece. There are 2 checks you can do from this rocket ride and coming off of the rocket, and the first one is on the way up on the rocket, I like to hold right trigger a little bit just to turn the camera into a position so that when Knuckles is about to leave the rocket, you can see on my left now, there is this huge arc tower just sticking on the side of my screen. And at the very tip of this tower, sometimes it can be an emerald piece that's just located, just kind of like chilling right on the end of it, just above the red square. And by turning the camera on the way up to the rocket, you can actually just glance over at this tower and make sure it's there. Or make sure if it's there, I meant to say. So you've got it on the rocket and you've turned the camera midway up to check the piece on the tower. If it's not on the tower, the next thing you check for is immediately upon braking from this rocket, no matter which direction your piece is, you're going to want to glide a little bit towards this platform. And I usually go just far enough so that this orange wall in the back loads into view. You'll notice like if I go far enough back, it sort of disappears from view and then comes back in. That's my indicator for if I can check the piece or not. Omochao also kind of spawns in at the same time if you want to use Omochao as a queue. But what I'm looking for here is there's just a piece that's kind of like vibing around these tree tags. It's just like schmooving a little bit, right? It's dancing up and around, all the way around town. And it's a really easy to spot piece, provided that you load it in. So for example, say my piece 1 was Evil Liquid, my checks would go as follows. Hey, nice piece. If I get sent to the top for my piece 2, and it's not on one of the close platforms like Dangerous Liquid or Evil Water Drops, I can glance over at the moving piece on the left platform over here. So there'll be a piece that like sort of moves up and down between this Dangerous Liquid and the wall. And as I come off of this rocket, hold on, let me go back down there for a second. So how's your day been, guys? Hope your day's been well. Anyway, yes, as you come off this rocket and you're gliding towards your next piece, you can actually just do a quick glance over at that platform and there'll be a piece just kind of like jamming up and down over there. That about covers it for standard piece checks, but I'll go into some more advanced ones later. For now, let's move on to some strats. For the piece 2 huge knots, I mean 2 huge knots, I mean 2 huge knots, I mean 2 huge containers, you want to go grab the piece and then make sure that you go down immediately to this hint. This is the closest hint to the middle spring, which will put you basically at equal distance from any piece 2 from here. For any piece on this mid-platform relative to the spring, like middle Dangerous Liquid or between the floating containers for example, you do not actually have to check the 3 pieces that I mentioned earlier on this platform. It just doesn't spawn with any of their sets. I'm having a hard time spawning the piece, so just bear with me, but there's a piece 1 called the Huge Shutter on the Steel Tower that spawns right in the middle of this X in the ground here, and there's a really awesome strat you can do for this. So essentially, if you're fast enough from reading this hint, and if you do the perfect movement to get to your piece 1, which is in the middle of this X, you can actually reach the piece before your hint is regenerated. And if you press B next to the hint that's shaded out that hasn't fully recovered yet, you go into a state called hint storage, which means as long as you don't press B until you pass the next hint, the hint will automatically read for you. It will store that hint press, the B button press that you did on this hint monitor. And then when you pass the next hint, which is further up on this platform up here, you can kind of see it just underneath resume game there. That will actually activate on your way up whilst you take the rocket, so it looks a little bit like this. If you get next to the rocket pointing at the arc, that's a fun strat that I've been doing recently that's only slightly risky, and what it is I don't read a hint at all. Did I just do 2 frame perfect dick? Never mind. So, I don't read a hint at all, I just go straight up from here, and either I get a ping, and if I don't get a ping, I check the piece that's moving here, and then I get a hint, and then go back down. And the reason I've started doing this is that it's actually quite a high probability that your piece is above you from that rocket, and getting a hint from this platform is just painfully slow, and especially if you do have to go back to that rocket, you're losing a lot of time. You either go to that hint, or in some weird cases, you go to this hint. Telling the difference between the two on top of the steel drilling tower piece 2s is actually quite easy once you know what you're looking for. I'll put a little guide on the screen now. Big thanks to Tommy for making that visual guide. This is one of the most important things to learn in Meteor. If I'm on this mid-platform where I've read my hint and it says still drilling tower, this happens in situations quite often when your piece 1 is like over on these platforms or something and then you go back over to this, because you always want to go back over to this mid-hint for piece 2 most of the time. If you read from here, you can actually do a really cool strat if you have yellow drilling tower. And trust me, this looks a lot harder than it actually is, but what you can do is you can run along the very edge of this container and then drill right as you get to the end of it, and you'll manipulate your gravity in such a way that you'll be falling pretty much directly onto the tower. In my opinion, this is one of the coolest strats in the stage and definitely the most fun to mess around with. So say I had my piece 1 over here, it looks something like this. For some serious bull or removal surgery for this. On a more fun note though, you know what is fun? Try digging while watching the moon or stars piece 3. There's actually 2 variants of pretty much the exact same piece. There's 4 different locations this can be in. And you're most likely going to see this from coming from quite high up in the stage, so what you do to check for which piece you have is, on the way down, you pass by the first platform it can be on. The first one it can be on is here, right next to this moon, and you keep drilling down past that if your piece is not on that platform. If you don't have radar by now, by you're approaching the lower platform, where there's 2 pieces on here, there's one here and then there's one lower. If you don't have radar for this platform, you just punch the spring to go to the middle one. As you can see, I got the middle one, which is kind of unlucky because it's the last one I checked for, but... So a quick run through of how that check would go with stars this time, because I'm quirky like that. If you do end up getting the lower Tridigging while watching the moon, how you tell apart the 2 different ones, because there's one slightly higher up and one slightly lower down. It's hard to, if you land on the side, the exclamation mark is all over the place, so it's really hard to tell which one it is. What I usually like to do is I land on top of the platform and I punch off the edge of it to get to the moon symbol. And if there's no exclamation mark while I punch off the edge, it has to be the lower one. If you have an exclamation mark while standing near the edge of this platform, then it's the other one. There are actually 2 different pieces for next to the mini steel beam. There's a the mini steel beam and an a mini steel beam. Next to the mini steel beam is on the left side, where next to a mini steel beam is on the right side. It's good to keep this in mind. If I use a meteorite that flies when you hit it, if I'm coming from above, I find the 3 arches and then I go to the one that's the most to the right. I turn my camera on the way down to make sure I land somewhere around this area in the first 2 squares of the arch. And then from here I just do a punch cell into the rock, and you should naturally be holding the right angle to punch it straight into the door and break the piece. Oh man, I'm really gonna have to explain cryptic checks, aren't I? For the sake of this video, I'm just gonna call them high roll checks, because it feels kind of weird to call them cryptic checks, considering, well, I'm cryptic. It's like talking in third person. But if you hear anyone in the community refer to cryptic checks, this is what they're talking about. So the basics of these checks are, if you have a piece 1 in the middle of the stage, like the middle platforms of the stage, and it's more on the left side than the right side, I'll list all the piece 1s that are possible with this on the screen now. And what I mean by to the left and to the right is if I'm looking at the free tanks area from coming off the rocket at this platform, which I consider to be pretty much the center of the stage, and anything on this side is to the left, and anything on this side is to the right. So for example, all the pieces on this platform will be considered to the left and are high roll check applicable. Deku SR actually made an incredibly awesome guide about these checks, and I'll leave the link in the description and also reference it a bunch during this tutorial. So how these checks work essentially is that if I have any of the piece 1s mentioned in the list on the left side, and my piece 2 is on the base of the stage, such as on top of the steel drilling tower and behind something powerful, then there is a really decent chance that my piece 3 is in the middle of the stage around these platforms, and I can go around in a quick loop to check most of the pieces to see if any of them are there. So the first thing I'm going to check is cage in a container, which means I'm going to take the spring immediately and run towards it. I can sort of angle my camera into the container to check the cage as I do this. That's sort of a hard thing that you've got to get used to. And if it's not there, the next thing I do is I go between these 2 containers and then take kind of a tight turn around so I don't waste too much time. But also I'm looking for a piece called moving around the Ark's huge storage area, which is sort of like dancing around over here. You'll see it pretty easily if you're doing this route. And if it's not there, I sort of just keep going. Land on this platform maybe. And then I move over near the jump from the star area. I'm looking for floating around the moon, which is here, and also circle the rotating beacon, which can be here. And if it's none of those pieces I just mentioned, I quickly take a dig into the ground here for between the 2 rotating beacons, and when I come out, I hit the spring. And then I go and check all 3 jump from the star pieces. So I'll break the mid one first because it's the highest one, meaning I can conserve my height, and go break the first one that's spinning in front of them, and then the far one at the back to check if that one's there. And if you happen to get absolutely none of them pieces that I just mentioned, then feel free to cry about it and curse me for ruining your run. Boy, do I love making things complicated, however, and I must mention that if your piece 2 is specifically a star between 3 arches, for whatever reason, this piece loves to give you 2 base pieces instead more often, so I would not do checks at all for this. I would just go straight down and continue on the set like normal. So I have mid-dangerous liquid, which allows me to do a quick run through what a cryptic check would look like, provided this is a base piece 2, which it is. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go over to cage and container first, check that, it's not there. I'm gonna go check for the moving piece, it's not there. I'm gonna go check for both of these moving pieces, neither of them are there, so I'm gonna dig between these two beacons, hit the spring, and if none of these 3 rocks are here, I just got completely blasted. And there we go. And then I go straight down to my piece 2 now, saving a lot of time over having to go all the way back up for this piece. These checks vary entirely based off what piece 1 you get, so some piece 1s give you a higher chance, some piece 1s give you an awful chance, and it's completely up to you which piece 1s you want to check for, and if you even want to check for any of them at all. I will mention though, with in front of a shortcut rocket, it's a 100% success rate. Like, for some reason, it's just entirely confirmed that you'll get a mid-piece 3 if you have shortcut rocket and a base piece 2. So it's always worth doing it for shortcut rocket. Another one I definitely recommend doing it for is in the floating containers piece 1, as this is a really high rate of success too, I believe like 80%. But I'll put the deku spreadsheet up on the screen right now, and I'll definitely leave a link for this in the description. I recommend before doing anything with these checks, you should go check out the spreadsheet and make sure that you're comfortable and you know what you're doing. Other than that, I think I've basically covered everything, so thanks for watching the video, and I hope I taught you some things about Meteor. Good luck with the Hero Story runs, good luck with the X20 runs, good luck with the Senti runs, no matter what you do with Meteor, and I hope it goes well. Have a good day. Please, I've been climbing for 32 years, my kids are in college, and my wife is a skeleton!